Welcome back to A Good Pour. I'm Kathryn Good, your host. This is Conversations about Good Work in our community. And today I'm very excited to have Officer Emily Tipsord. Did I say it right?
That's it.
We're going to say Officer Emily or just Emily for the rest of this podcast, if that's okay with you.
That's fine, yeah.
I'm just thrilled to have you here. You are our first officer, as I just told you, on... actually, I think you're our first responder at all. And so just crazy good work that you all do. Thank you for your service. But I would love to learn how you got involved with the force.
So it's not like a typical police story. I didn't grow up wanting to be a police officer. I grew up in Oregon, the old Oregon, not the new Oregon. So I grew up in Oregon, and I grew up actually in like a broken home. And so dealt with the realities of that adversity. And then, as I was growing up, I didn't make the best choices. But it really was stemmed from, not coming home to a stable house. And so as I grew up, I started making choices that weren't exactly great. And then, I went to school, and honestly, by the grace of God, I got into college and wound up going into criminal justice because I didn't know what I wanted to do. But I love the social aspect of it and just learning about people's behaviors and how they're driven. And so I actually went to UNLV and did my undergrad there, and then I went to grad school for criminal justice. So I knew that I wanted to help people, especially with this situation of like how I grew up and those experiences. I wanted to help people get through things that I got through, and definitely had like a heart for women, like women in different adverse situations, young girls. And so originally I thought I wanted to do something like victim services, or like when I went to grad school, I thought I'm going to be a lawyer. That looks so cool. That's what like they do at like SVU when they go in the courtroom and the lawyers like really hammer it down. But I wound up doing an internship with the DA's office, and I realized like this is not what I want to do. This is more reactive versus like hands-on. And the reality of it just looked a lot more like paperwork. I wound up doing some work with like different nonprofits for victim services, and that was also kind of reactive. But I had that desire to want to help people and I don't know, I guess serve people. And so I wound up meeting two police officers who were in my like grad class, and they were so opposite of what I thought a police officer was, because up until really in my early 20s, my perception of police officers looked a lot different, and probably what most of the U.S. thinks police officers look like today. I wound up meeting them, and they just made it real, like the way that they were, and like actually having conversations. I was like, you're not like, you're just like a person. This is really strange, because I thought you were kind of like robotic and I don't know, just not what I thought police officers.
Authoritarian?
Yeah. And just, like they look kind of the same. I had an idea of what they look like, how they're supposed to act. And then like these two officers came in and were so cool and just so like real life people. And one of them, I was telling them like what I want to do. I just didn't know what to do. And they were like, you should be a police officer. Like everything you're saying is what we do. And I was like, no, I don't want to pull people over. And they're like, we do a lot more than just pull people over, but that's what people think. And that's what I thought. Anyways, they kind of like fed that dream a little bit, but in a way that I didn't think was going to be the way I thought, if that makes sense. So fast forward, I graduate, I wind up coming out here. Part of my family's from Hendersonville. So I come out here and I'm waitressing, and I'm thinking like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Nothing is working out the way I thought. I still want to help people, but like, I have no idea what this is going to look like. I mean, to be transparent, like my faith is very important to me. So I basically got into like pray mode where I was like, I don't want to be doing what I'm doing. I'm so lost. I have no idea what to do. And literally like the next day, I get a table that I'm serving for a gentleman and a lady, and I start talking to them, and it turns out like they're the chief of police, like they're higher ups in the police department. And the lady was a commander in the Coast Guard. And I was thinking like, wow, like this is not how I thought people looked, like officers and law enforcement and stuff. But anyways, they were like, we're hiring, you should apply. And so I was to the point where I was like, hey, maybe I need to open up my mindset. So I prayed about it, and literally doors just kept opening, conversations. And I was like, okay, I think this is where I'm supposed to be going. But I didn't want to go that route because it's just scary. I'm thinking like police officers, that whole life is just so foreign to me. So, I know this is long-winded, but
No, it's great.
I was just basically at that point, like so desperate to find a purpose that, I continued to pray, and doors started opening, testing came. And I remember like no part of me wanted to go to the testing. And this doesn't sound anything like what people say. Like they're like, oh, I want to be a cop. But I was like,
Obedience is scary,
yeah,
right?
yes.
It's just, it can be very scary, even if you
Yes.
feel like you're supposed to be going. That's totally scary.
yeah. And that's a really good point. Obedience and like basically being very fearful. And I think at that moment I realized like up until that point, fear really dictated my life. Like fear dictated the choices I was making. I saw through the lens of fear. In ways that I didn't realize. And so the day I'm supposed to test, it's snowing. I'm supposed to like do a full physical thing. And I get out there and I'm literally shaking like I could throw up about how scared I am. And I'm sure if anyone at the department hears this, they're going to be like, really? But long story short, I test. And then after I did it, I felt so, I don't know if it's like empowered or just like owned it. And there's something very powerful about owning your fear. And I experienced it at that time, I was like, okay, this is what this is. Like, I feel like I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. And it's terrifying, but it's also like very, I don't know what the word is, just powerful. So, that kind of led me up into the point. I went through the policing process. Basically every step of the way, I was like, I cannot do this. Like, I'm a female. I try to take pride in the fact that I'm very feminine, because people have a misconception of being a female officer. And so, but I did too. So I'm thinking like, I don't have a law enforcement background. I'm pretty feminine. I thought like, I'm way too nice to be a police officer. And then my sister was like, no, you're not, you'll be fine. But anyway, so I just had all this like fear. At the end of the day, that's just fear. And every step of the way I would check in like, I don't want to do this. And like, I don't know, the Lord was like, no, this is where I want you. Like, keep going, keep moving forward. Like, this is where I'm calling you to be. And I was so confident in it by everything that was like the doors and the conversations and just doing things that I was like, whoa, where did that come from? So, that really got me to the point of becoming a police officer. And it's not exactly like the story that you hear a lot of the time, but it definitely opened up my eyes to like how powerful the spirit of fear is. And it still continues to, I have to check in with that because fear still drives a lot of what I do and the way I cope with life. And so, I don't know, I guess long story short is like, doors open and I got here, and sometimes I'm still like, I don't know why I'm doing this job or how, but I do feel like I've been called to this job. And I think a lot of officers would say that, maybe not articulate it the same, but basically there's a calling and you just say yes or you don't. But yeah.
So when was that? When did you say yes officially?
That was in 2020.
Okay.
So I've been on for 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And so Hendersonville Police Force. Okay. Mm-hmm. And what, since you talked a lot about like different, what would you want people to know about police officers?
I guess like there's really no difference between us, in the lack of a better term, them. Like, there's a big idea, it's like us versus them, but there's really no difference between you and I. It's just what I've, like, my commitment is to, I guess. My commitment is to, when I'm afraid, I have to keep going. Like, that's what I've committed to. And I don't think that's anything different than what any person does any day, but I am, like, consciously making that commitment. Does that make sense, I guess? So we're just people. We're just people who've made that commitment. And
what does a day look like for you?
People ask me that, and I don't have, like, an answer. I guess the only answer is it just looks different every day. It depends on what position you have at the department. But, like, as a patrol officer, which is what people think, and most of the time people see patrol officers. Those are the people who are doing, like, going to calls and doing traffic stops and things like that. Every day looks very different. And some days you have nothing to do. Like, there's just nothing. Like, there's no calls. Some days you just can't catch a break. Like, so every day is different. There's a lot of paperwork. So you didn't avoid that paperwork? No, that paperwork is, there's a lot of paperwork. And every day I feel like with different movements or different things happening in society, there just becomes more paperwork to check boxes. So yeah, it looks very different every day, I would say.
What is rewarding about it?
I wish I could say, like, just helping people, but sometimes you don't get to see if you help someone. I'd say more often than not, you don't know if you've ever helped someone.
You're just doing your job the next, like, whatever is called on you the next minute. Hope it makes a difference.
Yeah. And every so often, I haven't been in policing long enough for this to happen, really, but I know, like, there have been times that, like, someone would come up to me or come up to another officer and say, like, hey, you really helped me that day or something. But that's very rare. So for me personally, I think the most rewarding part of it is owning it. Owning what I was talking about, owning the fear, owning on the other side of fear, there's something very great. That spirit of fear is very, very strong, but when you, like, commit to get past it, the empowerment that comes from that is so powerful and freeing. And then you take that empowerment and you give it to other people. That part is very, very fulfilling. That, for me personally, that's what I get my fulfillment from. It's also fulfilling to see, just weird ways how, like, full circle kind of situations where, like 6 years ago when I was in college, I was like, I want to help people. I really have a heart for girls and young girls. Fast forward to policing. The Lord opened up opportunities during difficult parts of my time to basically, like, create trainings, and those trainings were then brought to high schools where I'm having conversations with young girls about making safe choices, respecting themselves. So things like that, like full circles, watching the Lord work in this type of work is very fulfilling as well. That I didn't think would ever come together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So you serve the community of Hendersonville. There can be tension, especially with anyone we view as an authoritative figure, right? Whether that's fear, whether that's misunderstanding, whether that's, somebody's going to pull me over and give me a ticket. So how do you feel like you personally, or just the force, works to improve kind of relationships within your community?
So I'm actually the community engagement officer. So, like, one of my biggest focus in the position is to develop those relationships in the community, strengthen them, or just keep them, basically. There is a very big misunderstanding of policing, and there's a misunderstanding of, like, what you said, of that resentment or hostility that we receive. That's usually coming from a place that it might look a certain way, but it's actually coming from something different, like what you said, fear, misunderstanding. So I think, especially recently with a lot of everything that's been going on in the U.S., really reaching out and getting to know our community, and asking them, like, how can I serve you? Like, what are our needs? Because so often, especially with this line of work, you tend to isolate because you're always around negative. You can only give so much to people. And the more you pour out, and if you're not getting poured into, you're empty, right? So a lot of people, a lot of officers, they pour out and they don't get poured into, and they feel drained and they feel tired, and they don't want to have those conversations. They don't want to, like, they're already emotionally drained. They don't want to go out and be like, how else can I serve you? Like, what else can I do? Part of my job, and then part of just kind of like realizing that and owning that and being like, hey, I know I'm tired today, but part of being filled is serving. And I think departments have embraced like community engagement teams and officers to kind of take on that task of saying like, hey, maybe we failed over here, or maybe you don't understand that. How can we help you understand that? And help us get on the same page where it's not so much like us as like a figure, but us as your community helping protect what your values are.
Yeah.
But it's changing. It's not a one like check the box and it's fixed. Like it's definitely a progress kind of thing.
Do you feel like it's getting better?
Yes and no. I think anytime that social media highlights certain types of perceptions, so anytime, or the news, anything like that. So anytime we have like a situation happen that's like a very big situation, like the George Floyd situation, any type of those like larger police involved situations, we always see it like get really bad. And because of the way even here, it's just the like your perception is what you see and your perception is your reality. And so when people see stuff like that on TV or social media, especially like our younger generation, they're not thinking about how much isn't being shown or how much has been shown or anything else.
Or if they're watching something that's biased toward one.
Yeah. So there's a lot of critical thinking that's not happening.
Amen.
But
Amen.
It doesn't matter because perception is reality for people. And so even if it's accurate or not, people are going to act on that perception. And so we do see it. It gets, usually it's like a hill. Like when something big happens, we can see the attitudes from the community and citizens dump, and then things start to get better, and then something else will happen. So I think that's just part of policing. I don't think that's anything new. I think that's been like that for a long time. So that's just like the human reality of it. But hopefully it will stay better. Yeah.
Well, I will just say, I think your story is inspiring. I had not heard it before today. Daniel Stevens nominated you, recommended you, whatever word you want to use for this, to be on this podcast, and I can see why very clearly now. But what I would tell you is I think when we are obedient, and doors open the way that they clearly did for you, well, one, there's a story to be told, right? There's a reference that you get to say God did this, right? And so I love that you're in a position of community engagement and helping pour in and know when you need to pour into other people, because I think that God has given you a strength of just knowing that He's there and seeing how He worked it out, and whether that's in faith or in just being able to give good life and good word to other people, I think you can do that because of what you've been through, even if you did not plan on this career. So I'm just encouraged that you're there, to be honest, because you're exactly right. You cannot pour out if you're empty. And I can see how being a police officer can be lonely. It can also, I'm sure, be very, very fulfilling, just like the kind of mountains that you just said. So, yeah, and I know that you're poured into in ways that other people can't be because they don't know the God, right? And so thanks for serving in specifically as a police officer, but shining His light in the force too. I'm just thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you.
Anything else you'd like people to know about you or the force? Or
we don't actually love donuts the way people think we do. But I do appreciate a good donut.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
If somebody wanted to kind of pour in, is that food? Is that baskets that you see? Is there anything helpful that people can do or bring or say or do?
oh gosh, I don't know. When people support us, it means more than sometimes how we can articulate it. I also work with mostly a male dominant environment. So they're not the most communicative. I guess people give us food. People will stop and, thank you, things like that. That means so much because there's a lot of places in the U.S. where that doesn't happen. And actually, it's a very opposite treatment. So already, just that's very encouraging. And I know that we definitely appreciate it. And it is hard, though, to answer that question because each of us on the force have different ways of things that we need.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest, I think most of the ways that we need is to just remember that our identity is not police officer. That's what we do, but it's not who we are. And to stay in touch with things outside of work. But people ask, how can they help? And that's not something exactly people have control over. That's something that we as individual officers have to kind of navigate. So, but regardless, those type of acts, they are very appreciative, and that does help us a lot. So, yeah.
Good to know. Well, thank you for the good work you do every day. Thank you for being obedient. And thanks for being here today.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And if you're listening, make sure to thank an officer.